Joining us for this segment is Brian Holland, who is chair of the Capital Area Workforce Development Board, and Pat Sturdivant, who's executive director of the Capital Area Workforce Development Board. And the Capital Area Workforce Development Board is based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I'll let both of them talk a little bit more about what they do and their regions. I think I'll start with you though, Brian, because I mentioned you're chair of the board, but I know as a private sector business member, you have a real job, a day job. So Brian, share with our audience what you do when you're not chairing the workforce board.
When I'm not chairing the workforce board, I work as an attorney. I'm general counsel for an IT training company called Global Knowledge, which operates in 16 different countries and focuses primarily on providing authorized IT training for companies like Cisco, Microsoft, VMware, and things like that.
That's great and amazing that you give your time to workforce services, so thank you for that. Pat, you and I have known each other a while.
It's been a minute.
It's great to see you here, and thanks for agreeing to do this. So Pat, talk a little bit briefly about your region, the Capital Area Workforce Region, and how long you've been in your role.
Well, I've been with Capital Area 11 years. Capital Area is made up of Wake and Johnston County. We are the largest local area in North Carolina. And when you think about the makeup of our board, you know, Raleigh is in the capital, but then we have Johnston County that's more rural. Mm-hmm. So we get a little bit of both worlds in, you know, providing services.
Absolutely. Well, reason why I want to tell you how special these guests are is this region actually is a winner this year of the Trailblazer Award. So congratulations for being Trailblazers.
Thank you.
I'm not at all surprised, and I'm very excited for you. So Pat, I want to ask you a little bit about where your region currently is in the recovery, and specifically your workforce system. Kind of what are you guys looking at, and how are you planning for this kind of post-pandemic or post-COVID economy and workforce system? Share with us.
Well, I tell you, the first thing I'll say is we've learned a lot. You know, we started even before COVID, you know, we created a contact center so that we could provide another avenue to reach our customers. We could provide services via the telephone, chat, WebEx, and other forms. And so when the pandemic hit, we were ready. You know, of course, we had to train more staff and get them on board with providing services virtually, because we learned that just because you're a great case manager face-to-face doesn't mean that you could do that over the phone. So we learned through the COVID process that we can be just as effective providing services virtually. So that's one of the things that we're thinking about, is how we can provide even more services and how we can reach more people by continuing to provide services virtually. We're seeing in our region, we're hearing from employers that, like everywhere else, it's hard for them to get people to come back to work. We're hearing from job seekers. We're slowly seeing them coming back to the centers. Slowly. We're still getting a lot of calls, and you know, some of the legislative changes as far as, you know, people with UI are now having to come back to the center. So we're seeing a slight increase, but we still have people that want to receive those services virtually, and we want to continue to provide that access.
Yeah, I think all workforce boards right now are trying to figure out what that new mix is going to be in terms of how people choose to connect with the system.
Yeah.
Now, you guys have some of the most gorgeous workforce centers I've ever been in.
Thank you.
So proud to be part of your center system as one of your providers. And so I'm sure brick and mortar is going to stay in your future. You don't see decreasing that anytime soon, right?
No, we will have brick and mortar, because we have some people. Again, when I think about our workforce board, one of the populations we're targeting is the older worker. And you have a lot of people that, you know, can't access the services virtually. Right. So we don't want to have virtual services to replace brick and mortar. We want to have virtual services to reach more people.
Right. So if you were, just based on kind of the temperature you're seeing as people kind of come out of the shadows of COVID-19, what are some of the kind of future-oriented strategies operationally you guys are talking about doing in order to maintain to expand access both in person and virtually. You mentioned the contact center. You guys have been doing virtual job fairs.
Right.
Do you plan to continue offering those
Oh,
as well as the in-person?
Exactly. Like again, we've learned a lot, and we'll still do face to face because some people really want to have that interaction. But I think that's a platform we'll continue, and we will look at other opportunities to provide services or meetings. I'll give a good example. As a board, we have a partner meeting quarterly, and that's where we have all our partners, community, the core partners, as well as additional partners, and they come together to talk about performances, share best practices, and we've been doing those virtually for the last year and a half, and we probably doubled participation.
Wow.
And so we've decided, why have people drive from Johnston County to Wake and so forth? Let's continue to have those things virtually. So again, we're looking and picking and choosing what makes sense to continue down that path.
I think for most boards, and it sounds like for your boards, it's almost kind of the silver lining
Right.
of the pandemic is now we're able to actually reach more people.
That's right.
By offering multiple ways in which to engage with us. So I think you're absolutely right in your focus. Brian, I want to switch to you a minute. I know your board is deeply engaged in strategic planning. You're hot in the middle of it right now. Share with our audience some of what your board is talking about.
Well, largely the way our board works is we have a very active board, and it's not just about going to our board meetings and voting on occasion. We split our board up into various working committees that help take the strategic initiatives that the board has decided to move on and then implement through tactics and other things those strategic plans. And we're about to move into our new strategic planning process where we're going to be setting up new committees and where we're going. And we just finished our quarterly board meeting a few minutes ago. And one of the things, well, not one of the things, pretty much the entire meeting was all focusing on DEI. And so part of our strategic planning process as we move forward will be about whether or not we set up special DEI initiatives or whether DEI should just be pervasive across anything we do from a strategic standpoint.
I'm so excited to hear you talk about how your board is focused on DEI. We're certainly seeing that, although people are in different stages of the conversation. So I'd kind of be curious, how did that conversation go with your board? And do you think that your board will land in a place where they view their role is really taking a lead in the community and setting, kind of being the standard bearer for DEI initiatives?
I hope so, because that was a large part of the discussion today about where we are. Simply, what is DEI and what can we do? And one of the things, coming out of a corporate background, when we talk about DEI, we're often talking about our own workforce. But the discussion we were having with our board this morning was about DEI relative to our customer base, particularly the job seeker customer. And are we doing what we can to make sure that the opportunities are available to everyone? I mean, we were just talking a few seconds ago about virtual versus brick and mortar. And we're finding that different segments want virtual, different segments want brick and mortar, and they don't necessarily fall down the lines where you think. I mean, Pat was just talking about how it's our business customers who are looking for virtual because it saves them time. They don't have to commute.
Right.
Where often when we think about that, it's people who may have transportation issues, childcare issues, who can't get to workforce center, or quite honestly, when we were shut down. So I think we have to just start thinking about things from a broader perspective. And that's largely what we were talking about today, is the need to take a different perspective, put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and understand their issues and see how we can meet those needs.
That's really exciting. I'm not sure who wants to tackle this, but I know a little bit about this workforce area, and I know that you guys are very focused on data. So I'm really curious how you see data playing a role in your planning in priorities.
I'll go for it. I think it's key. Because one of the things that's interesting in the region we're in the research triangle, is that we have got one of the best economies in the country right now. We weren't as badly affected by the pandemic. We're going to snap back faster than the pandemic. We are attracting businesses like crazy. Google's moving in, Apple's moving in. Just the number of economic development announcements have been amazing. We're going to have great numbers in the research triangle. But what sometimes those numbers don't show, or what those numbers can hide, are the people who've been left behind.
Right.
Because while things are great in the triangle, when you look at social and economic mobility, I'm embarrassed to admit that of the 50 top metros in the country, we rank 46th. Wow. If you were born poor in Wake County, you're likely to never get out of poverty. And that's something that's not acceptable. And one of the things we've talked about in our board is, what role can we play to make sure that those opportunities come to everyone, to make sure that the rising tide does lift all boats? Who can we partner with? What programs can we initiate? And honestly, that's what I'm really, really excited about going into the future.
Well, that's great to hear. And I know one of the populations you are focused on, because they are in that group you're talking about, is the reentry population.
Yes.
And Pat, you guys have done some great work with reentry. You want to share some of what you've done and what you're doing now?
Yes, we've been really intentional with our reentry, and I'm really proud to say where we are now, and it's continuing to grow. We started with the federal DOL grant, working with individuals 25 and older. And we've had a lot of success with that. Of course, with COVID, it slowed down, but we've had a lot of success. In addition to that, we're also working with the Department of Public Safety, where we're serving as the intermediary for the local reentry council for Wake County. And with that council, we have a partnership of over 30 community-based organizations that provide services to formerly incarcerated individuals. And we serve sort of the hub or triaging to send them to the appropriate partners. And just in the last month, our county commissioners have asked us to, we've reached out to our county commissioners and provided a presentation, and they're looking to close the gap, because funding is important for all that we do.
Right.
And so we're in the process now of putting a proposal together so they could help fill some of those gaps we have in serving that population. So we are really proud of, how we've grown that area.
That's terrific. Well, before we wrap up, I want to give both of you an opportunity, just kind of share some final thoughts with our audience about your region and the work of your board and your system. Brian, I'll start with you. What would you like to share?
Some final thoughts. One is, the pandemic has changed everything. And in some ways we didn't. If you were to go back to our meetings a year ago, you would have heard, and unfortunately they're on Zoom and they're recorded, and I'm going to be proven wrong, where I was very concerned about what we were just talking about, that we were going to see such massive unemployment that underserved populations were going to be even more difficult to serve, because from an employment perspective, it was going to be a buyer's market. One of the things I'm really excited about where we're going to be able to go is, because, at least in our area, people are struggling to find the employees that they want at all ends of the spectrum. And our ability to do the work with underserved populations and so on is actually not only going to not be diminished, but is going to be necessary in order to meet the workforce needs of our local area. And we're going to have people hiring people they didn't necessarily think they would. And our ability to help put programs to get those people the skills they need, I'm just really excited about.
It's a great time to actually get business to the table, right? We've definitely got their attention.
Yes.
And we do that on a regular basis. I mean, in our meeting this morning, we were just talking about the last roundtable we had with one of our sector initiatives committees, talking to employers about their IT needs, not the large IT companies, but the other non-traditional companies that all have IT needs. But we do that on a regular basis, pulling employees to the table and listening to their concerns and their needs, and then trying to put process and programs in place to support it. My last word would be I'm privileged to be part of Capital Area Workforce Development Board. And one of the things that motivates me is the fact that we have such an engaged board, as you can see from our chair. And if you were to sit in our board meetings, we just don't have board members that's there to be on a board. We
Right.
have board members that's there to work. And as an executive director, that helps, that motivates you to want to do more and be the best that you can be. And I think Capital Area Workforce Development Board is that board.
I was gonna say, give me
go-
one last word.
Yeah, go for it.
Because when Pat gives a lot of credit to the board, the reality is Pat and her staff and our partners like Equus is actually where the magic happens. They're the ones who make everything happen. Sometimes we come up with good ideas, but we don't make those happen.
Right.
It's everybody else involved, and they're the ones who really need to be thanked.
Well, I think it's awesome you pointed that out, because I do want to say Equus works with boards all around the country, and always enjoyed working with Capital Area Workforce Development Board, because you do have all the pieces in place. You have a really strong board that's strategically focused, and you've had great leadership on that board for many years. You have an outstanding staff that's supportive, gives clear direction to their providers, but also provides lots of support and guidance. And all of that really allows providers like us and some other providers that serve your local system to really operate at the highest levels. So we thank you for that leadership and support that you provide, that really allows us to do work that our people get up every day and are so proud to do. So Pat, Brian, thank you for joining us. Congratulations again on the
Thank you.
Trailblazer Award. And take care. I look forward to seeing what you do next in the capital area.